The smoke from the hickory smoker curled into a sky that looked like a peach had exploded. My husband Frank had been basting those ribs since dawn, swearing his secret ingredient was love. The truth, which he'd take to his grave, was that the secret came from a YouTube video by a man in Oklahoma with a handlebar mustache. The backyard was packed. Folding chairs groaned under the weight of relatives. Kids I barely recognized sprinted between the oak trees, their faces smeared with my potato salad. Church ladies hovered near the dessert table, dissecting my banana pudding like forensic scientists. I stood in the doorway and let myself feel it, contentment. At 58, my little home decor shop, Cole's Corner, had finally made Frank and me a comfortable life. We had paid off the house. We had savings. We had each other. Then Corey's Escalade pulled up, black and gleaming like a hearse at a picnic. He parked diagonally across my driveway, blocking Frank's truck. The driver's door opened, and out came the pale linen blazer first, then the slicked back hair, then the smile. That smile. It could sell ice to a penguin. Aunt Maggie. His arms spread wide, a bottle of bourbon dangling from one hand with a bow tied by someone who wasn't him. Woman of the hour. Corey. You're 3 hours late. Fashionably. He kissed my cheek and left a chemical cloud of cologne. Doesn't she look beautiful, Frank? Frank didn't turn from the smoker. His shoulders tensed like a man bracing for impact. Corey worked the crowd like he was running for office, which, I'd heard, he planned to do. He laughed too hard at Mrs. Patterson's hip replacement joke. He quoted Pastor Mike's March sermon from memory. He shook hands with the menfolk and called the older ladies young lady until they blushed. He was good. He'd always been good. That was the danger. When the ribs were bones and the last spoonful of banana pudding had been fought over, Corey rose and tapped his glass with a fork. The chatter stilled. Folks, a toast. Frank's hand found mine under the table and squeezed until my knuckles ached. To Aunt Maggie. The woman who raised me after my mama passed. The woman who gave me a home. The woman who, 5 years ago, let me invest $30,000 in her charming little shop. The word little landed like a stone in my stomach. Now, I'm no accountant. Corey paused, waiting for the chuckles. They came. But the numbers don't lie. My investment has grown to $475,000. The number floated across the yard like a wasp. So, Aunt Maggie, I've decided it's time to collect. I'm running for county board, and this community needs me. I know you understand. Every head swiveled toward me. My daughter Trish, who adored Corey, clapped her hands. Mrs. Patterson fanned herself with a paper plate. Pastor Mike's eyebrows disappeared into his hairline. Frank's grip was crushing now. I could feel the fury vibrating through him. I stood. I smoothed my sunflower apron. I looked at my nephew, my dead sister's son, the boy I'd taught to ride a bike and write thank you notes and apologize when he broke things. From my apron pocket, I pulled a thin white envelope. Of course, Corey. 3 days. Here's the bank confirmation. I handed it over. He blinked, he'd expected a fight, then snatched the envelope and held it up like a trophy. See? This is family. Aunt Maggie has always been generous. He grinned, sly. Some might even say she's a soft touch. Uneasy laughter. Frank's chair tipped backward as he stood. I grabbed his arm. Frank. Dishes. Now. He followed me into the house, the screen door slamming behind us like a gunshot, leaving Corey to soak up applause from people who had no idea what had just happened. In the kitchen, Frank erupted in a furious whisper. $475,000, Maggie. Our entire savings. And he called you a soft touch in front of the whole town. Yes, he did. I poured 2 coffees. You just handed him an envelope and smiled. The envelope was empty, Frank. He froze. What? It was just a folded piece of paper with confirmed written on it. A prop. I handed him his mug. Do you remember 5 years ago when Corey brought us that $30,000? His brow furrowed. The insurance money from your sister. The money that should have gone to you. Right. And you, being the detail man you are, spent 3 days writing up a contract. Understanding flickered in his eyes. The convertible note. Which was never an investment agreement. It was a loan document. From Corey to us. $30,000 plus $15,000 in interest. Generous interest. So we only owe him $45,000? Frank's face was shifting from rage to confusion. But the $475. The check I'm giving him in 3 days is for the full amount. But he'll have to sign a receipt. I walked to the roll-top desk and pulled out a folder. And that receipt is also a loan agreement. $430,000. From us. To him. Frank opened the folder. His eyes scanned the page. Then he laughed, a short, surprised bark. He won't read it. He never does. He'll sign whatever you put in front of him. That's the plan. Frank sank into a chair, shaking his head. Maggie Cole, you scare me sometimes. Good. I kissed his forehead. He called me a soft touch. He's about to learn that the softest things can cut the deepest. 3 days later, Corey swept into the bank like he already owned the building. He brought his campaign manager, a nervous young man in a cheap suit who looked like he'd been hired that morning. Our lawyer, Diane, slid a stack of papers across the conference table. She had a stare that could peel paint. Mr. Whitfield, the final settlement. $475,000. Just sign at each flag. There were 11 flags. Corey signed them all without reading a single line, his pen scratching across the pages while he talked about polling numbers. When he finished, I handed him a cashier's check. He held it up to the light, checked the zeros, and beamed. Pleasure doing business, Aunt Maggie. Always, Corey. He swept out. Through the window, I watched his Escalade roar away. Did he really just sign all of that without reading? Diane asked. He always does. I folded my hands. Now we wait. The call came 48 hours later. Not from Corey, from the IRS. Corey had filed paperwork claiming the entire $475,000 as tax-exempt investment returns. But the documents he'd signed told a different story. $45,000 was loan repayment to him, and $430,000 was a new loan from me. Only the $15,000 interest was taxable income. The discrepancy triggered an automatic audit. Corey called me at 6 a.m, his voice cracked and frantic. Aunt Maggie. The IRS is saying I committed fraud. There's something wrong with the paperwork. Is there? I poured my coffee. I thought you read everything before you signed. Silence. Then, quieter, what did you do? I gave you exactly what you asked for, Corey. You wanted $475,000. You got it. The terms are just a little different than you assumed. This is entrapment. This is math. I stirred my coffee. You should have read the fine print, sweetheart. Your mother always told you to read the fine print. The line went dead. Sunday morning, I went to church as usual. The gossip had already spread through the congregation like a virus. People who'd applauded Corey at the barbecue now whispered behind their bulletins. Mrs. Patterson caught me in the fellowship hall. Maggie, is it true? Corey owes you nearly $500,000? He owes the bank. I just hold the note. And he signed it without reading? Apparently. She cackled, slapping her knee. Oh, I'd have paid good money to see his face. Pastor Mike approached more cautiously. Maggie, I have to ask, is there any path toward forgiveness here? I considered the question. Pastor Mike was a good man. He'd buried my first husband and married me to Frank. He'd baptized my daughter. He deserved an honest answer. Pastor, my sister, Corey's mother, was the sweetest soul I ever knew. Before she died, she made me promise to look after her boy. I straightened my hymnal. She didn't mean spoil him. She meant teach him what she couldn't. That's what I'm doing. Through financial ruin? Through consequences. The boy I raised knew right from wrong. The man he became just stopped caring about the difference. I met his eyes. I love him too much to let him keep going the way he was. Pastor Mike nodded slowly. There's scripture about that. Spare the rod, spoil the child. Something like that. As I walked out into the autumn sunshine, Frank was waiting by the truck. He opened my door, which he'd done every Sunday for 15 years. How bad was it in there? Mrs. Patterson offered to testify on our behalf if it goes to court. Frank grinned. I love small towns. So do I, honey. So do I. Corey didn't go quietly. That wasn't his style. 2 weeks after the IRS audit notice, a story appeared on the local news website. The headline read, "Local business owner accused of swindling nephew out of inheritance." The article quoted an anonymous family source and painted me as a greedy old woman who'd tricked her own flesh and blood. Frank read it at breakfast and pushed his eggs away. This is him. This has Corey's fingerprints all over it. I know. He's trying to drag you through the mud before the town can hear the truth. I buttered my toast. Then let's make sure the town hears the truth first. I called Trish. My daughter worked part-time at the shop and knew everyone's business before they did. Sweetheart, I need you to do something for me. Within an hour, Trish had posted the full story on the Elmwood Community Facebook group. Not a rant. Not accusations. Just the facts. The original contract. The promissory note Corey signed. The IRS filing. All of it, laid out with the kind of clarity that left no room for argument. The comments flooded in. Wait, so he's the one who didn't read the contract? Corey Whitfield called Maggie Cole a soft touch? The woman who paid for half the new church roof? I went to school with Corey. This tracks. By noon, Corey's article had been taken down. By dinner, his campaign website had gone dark. His run for county board was over before it began. But I knew my nephew. He wouldn't just slink away. He'd find another angle. He'd find someone else to use. That someone turned out to be my own daughter. Trish had always been sweet. Too sweet, maybe. She saw the best in everyone, especially people who didn't deserve it. Corey had introduced her to her husband, a man named Dale with perfect teeth and zero work ethic. I'd never liked him, but Trish was in love, and you can't tell a daughter in love anything she'll actually hear. One rainy Tuesday, 3 weeks after Corey's public humiliation, Trish showed up at my door soaked and shaking. Her face was blotchy from crying. Mom, I need help. I pulled her inside. Frank brought a blanket. We sat her on the couch and waited. Dale is gone. Her voice cracked. He took the deed to the house. He took out a second mortgage I didn't know about. $600,000. He cleaned out everything and left. Frank's face went dark. Where is he now? I don't know. His phone is disconnected. His friends won't talk to me. She looked up at me, eyes swollen. Corey introduced us. Corey vouched for him. Mom, what do I do? I felt a cold fury settle in my chest. Corey had found his angle. He couldn't hurt me directly, so he'd gone after my daughter. Dale was his friend. This wasn't random. This was retaliation. We're going to fix this, I said. But Trish, you have to listen to me. Really listen. Can you do that? She nodded, small and scared. I'll help you save the house. I'll pay the emergency bills to stop the foreclosure. But there are conditions. Anything. First, the deed goes into my name. You can live there as long as you want, but legally, I own it. Second, you sign a statement acknowledging what happened and agreeing to cut ties with Corey, completely. No contact. No forgiveness. No more chances. She flinched. Cut ties with Corey? He's family. Corey used you to get to me. He sent Dale into your life knowing exactly what would happen. That's not family. That's warfare. Trish stared at her hands. Then she nodded. Okay. I'll sign. Frank, who'd been silent, stood and walked to his workshop. I knew where he was going. He kept a baseball bat in there, a Louisville Slugger his father had given him. He wasn't going to use it. Frank wasn't violent. But holding it made him feel less helpless. I called in a favor from a man named Roy, a retired state trooper who now ran a small private investigation business out of his garage. Roy had a face like a basset hound and the instincts of a bloodhound. Dale Whitfield? Roy said. Any relation to Corey? Corey's friend. Corey introduced him to my daughter. That's all I need to know. Give me 48 hours. He called back in 24. Your son-in-law is at a casino in Prairie du Chien. He's been there 3 days. He's down to his last few thousand. Can you get me in? I can get you in, get you a seat at his table, and get you out before anyone notices. When do you want to go? Tonight, I said. And Roy? Bring your camera. The Riverside Casino sat on the Mississippi River, a squat concrete box full of blinking lights and desperate hope. The air inside smelled like stale cigarettes and spilled beer. Slot machines chimed in discordant chorus. At a poker table in the back, Dale slouched in his chair, his perfect smile nowhere in sight. He looked terrible. Unshaven. Bloodshot eyes. A half-empty glass of whiskey sweating onto the felt. I slid into the empty seat across from him. It took him a moment to recognize me. When he did, the color drained from his face. Maggie. His voice came out strangled. What are you doing here? Looking for my daughter's future. I set my purse on the table. I hear you've been gambling with it. Look, I can explain. Don't. I held up a hand. I'm not here for explanations. I'm here to make you a deal. He glanced around, looking for exits. But Roy was standing by the door, arms crossed, and Frank was somewhere behind me, close enough to matter. What kind of deal? I pulled out a check for $50,000 and placed it on the table. Dale's eyes locked onto it like a starving dog on a stake. That's yours. All you have to do is win it. What do you mean? I mean, let's play a hand. Just one. You and me. You win, you keep the check, and I walk away. You lose. I let the pause stretch. You sign a full confession. Fraud, theft, all of it. Then you turn yourself into the police. He licked his lips. That's insane. That's the deal. Take it or leave it. The dealer shuffled. The cards whispered. Around us, the casino hummed on, indifferent. Dale stared at the check. I could see the calculations running behind his bloodshot eyes. He was a gambler. Gamblers always believe they can win. Fine, he said. One hand. Deal. The card slid across the felt. I didn't look at mine. You know, I said, my sister was a poker player. Taught me everything she knew. The most important lesson? Never sit down at a table if you don't know who the mark is. I flipped my cards. Full house. Dale's hand trembled. He laid down his cards. 2 pair. Now, I said, sliding a pre-written confession across the table along with a pen, sign. He signed. His hand shook so badly the signature was barely legible, but it was his name. Roy stepped forward, took the confession, and nodded at me. The police are outside, Roy said. You can walk out with them or you can run. Your choice. Dale didn't run. I left the casino with the confession in my purse and $50,000 back in my account. Frank drove us home through the dark Wisconsin countryside, the Mississippi glinting in the moonlight. You let him think he had a chance, Frank said. He always thought he had a chance. That was his whole problem. That was cold, Maggie. I looked out the window at the passing fields. He stole my daughter's future. Cold was the least I could do. Trish was waiting at our house when we got back. She stood on the porch, wrapped in the same blanket, her face pale with worry. The bank called. The foreclosure is on hold. She swallowed. Did you find Dale? We found him. He confessed. He's in police custody. Her knees buckled. Frank caught her. Easy, honey. How? She whispered, looking at me. How did you get him to confess? I gave him a choice. I sat beside her on the porch swing. He chose wrong. Trish was quiet for a long moment. Then, in a small voice, I should have listened to you. About Corey. About Dale. About all of it. Yes, I said. You should have. But you're listening now. That's what matters. What happens next? The house is safe. I paid the bank enough to stop the bleeding. But Trish, you're going to have to be strong now. Stronger than you've ever been. How? By letting me help you. And by keeping your word about Corey. No contact. No matter what he says or does. Can you do that? She nodded, tears spilling over. I can do that. Good. I pulled her close. Because you're my daughter. And nobody, not Corey, not Dale, not anyone, gets to use you as a weapon against this family. The next morning, the story of Dale's arrest made the local paper. Man arrested in casino after wife's family exposes mortgage fraud. Corey's name wasn't mentioned, but everyone knew. The threads connected themselves. Corey called that afternoon. I let it ring 6 times before answering. You put my friend in jail. His voice was ice. Your friend put himself in jail. I just handed him the pen. Dale is saying I put him up to it. The police want to talk to me. That sounds like a personal problem. You destroyed my campaign. You destroyed my reputation. Now you're trying to destroy my freedom. He breathed hard into the phone. You're not the woman who raised me. You're right. I'm not. I sat down at the kitchen table, Frank's coffee still warm in my hand. The woman who raised you loved you so much she let you get away with everything. She made excuses for you. She cleaned up your messes. She hoped you'd grow out of it. I paused. She died waiting. I'm not going to make the same mistake. I'll fix this. I'll find a way. Corey, you owe me $430,000. Your friend is facing felony charges. Your political career is dead. There's nothing left to fix. There's only what comes next. And what's that? Consequences. I set down my coffee. You're going to learn what they feel like. For the first time in your life. I love you enough to make sure of it. I hung up before he could respond. The weeks that followed were quiet, in the way that small towns are quiet before a storm. Trish kept her word. She changed her phone number. She moved into the spare bedroom at our house while her place was being sorted out. She started helping at the shop full-time, learning the business from the ground up. Corey, meanwhile, was drowning. I heard it through the usual channels. Mrs. Patterson saw his Escalade being repossessed in the grocery store parking lot. Pastor Mike mentioned he'd missed 3 Sundays in a row. The bank manager, a friend from church, confirmed that foreclosure proceedings on Corey's condo had begun. I didn't gloat. That wasn't the point. One evening in late October, Trish and I stayed late at the shop, rearranging the holiday window display. She'd designed it herself, a warm, glowing tableau of a family Thanksgiving. It was good. Better than anything I'd done at her age. You know what I keep thinking about, she said, adjusting a ceramic turkey. What? The barbecue. When Corey stood up and called you a soft touch. She turned to me. I was so proud of him in that moment. I thought he was so smart. So successful. I looked at you and felt embarrassed. Ashamed even. That you'd just roll over and give him what he wanted. That's what he wanted you to feel. I know that now. She set down the turkey. But here's the thing. You let him humiliate you. You let everyone think you were weak. Why? You could have shut him down right there. I thought about it. Outside, the street was dark and quiet. A few leaves skittered past the window. Because if I'd fought him publicly, he would have become the victim. The nephew who just wanted what he was owed, attacked by his greedy aunt. I straightened a string of lights. He needed to be the one holding the rope. That way, when it snapped, he had no one to blame but himself. Trish was quiet for a moment. Then she laughed, a real, genuine laugh. You're kind of terrifying, Mom. I prefer strategic. Did you learn that from Aunt Eleanor? At the mention of my sister's name, something shifted in my chest. I learned a lot from your aunt. Including what happens when you love someone so much you refuse to see who they really are. Trish nodded. She understood. The holidays came and went. Thanksgiving was small, just me, Frank, Trish, and a few neighbors. The shop did well. Corey's condo sold at auction. I bought it through a proxy and held it as a rental property. He'd never know. In January, I received a letter. Handwritten, on cheap paper. No return address. Dear Aunt Maggie. I'm writing this from a motel outside Madison. It's not much, but it's what I can afford. I've been working construction. It's the first real job I've had in 10 years. My back hurts every night and my hands are raw and I've never been more tired in my life. I'm not writing to ask for anything. I just wanted you to know, I've started paying back the loan. $50 a week. It'll take me about 165 years to pay off the full amount. I figure that's about right. I hated you for a long time. I thought you'd set me up. But I've had a lot of time to think, and I finally read the documents. All of them. The contract from 5 years ago. The promissory note. Everything. You never lied. You never cheated. You just let me sign things I should have read. I don't know if I'll ever be able to face you again. But I wanted you to know that I'm trying. Not to get the money back, or the campaign, or any of that. Just to be someone my mother might have been proud of. I'm sorry it took losing everything to get here. Corey. I read the letter 3 times. Then I folded it and put it in my desk drawer, next to the photo of my sister. Frank found me there later, staring at nothing. What's that? A letter from Corey. His face tightened. What does he want? Nothing. He's paying back the loan. $50 a week. Frank blinked. That'll take forever. I know. I touched the photo of my sister. Eleanor smiled back at me, frozen in time, forever young. I'm proud of him. For paying $50 a week? For finally learning. I closed the drawer. It took everything he had. But he's learning. Frank put his hand on my shoulder. You're not going to let him off the hook, are you? No. I stood. But I'm not going to pretend it doesn't matter, either. He's my sister's son. He'll always be my sister's son. Spring came to Elmwood, and with it, the annual church potluck. The fellowship hall filled with casseroles and laughter. I set my banana pudding on the dessert table and took my usual seat. Halfway through the meal, the door opened and Corey walked in. The room went quiet. Forks paused midair. Every eye tracked him as he crossed to where I sat. He looked different. Thinner. Older. His hair was longer, and there was gray at the temples. He wore a plain flannel shirt and work boots. No blazer. No cologne. Aunt Maggie. His voice was quiet. Can I sit? I gestured to the empty chair beside me. Frank tensed, but I put a hand on his arm. Corey sat. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I got your letter, I said finally. I figured. You're paying $50 a week. Every Friday. He almost smiled. The bank knows my name now. That's a start. He looked down at his hands, rough, calloused hands that had never done manual labor before. I came to say I'm sorry. In person. No crowd. No toast. He swallowed. I called you a soft touch. I was wrong. You're the strongest person I know. I let the words settle. I'm not forgiving you today, Corey. That's going to take time. Maybe a lot of it. I know. But you're welcome to sit at this table. You're welcome to come to church. You're welcome to be part of this family again, as long as you understand that it's going to be different. No more shortcuts. No more schemes. No more using people. He nodded, eyes glistening. I understand. Good. I pushed a plate toward him. Eat something. You look like you haven't had a good meal in months. He laughed, a little brokenly, and reached for a dinner roll. Around us, the chatter slowly resumed. Mrs. Patterson shot me a questioning look. I gave her a small nod. Pastor Mike smiled from across the room and raised his coffee cup. Frank leaned close. You're really going to let him back in? I'm going to let him try. There's a difference. And if he messes up again? Then he's out. For good. And he knows it. I looked at my husband, this good man who had stood by me through all of it. Everyone deserves a chance to change. But nobody deserves unlimited chances. Frank nodded slowly. He looked at Corey, who was eating like a man who hadn't seen food in days, and his expression softened just a little. He does look terrible, Frank admitted. I know. It's kind of satisfying. Frank snorted into his coffee. The potluck continued. Someone started a hymn. Children chased each other between the tables. Outside, the first crocuses of spring pushed through the thawing ground. And I sat between my husband and my nephew, thinking about my sister, about the promise I'd made her all those years ago. I'd promised to look after her boy. I just hadn't known, back then, what looking after would really mean. Thanksgiving came to Elmwood wrapped in a blanket of fresh snow. I woke early, as I always did on holidays, and stood at the kitchen window watching the flakes drift past the porch light. The world outside was silent and clean and full of possibility. Frank found me there, his robe pulled tight. You're doing it again. Doing what? Staring out the window like you're expecting someone. I leaned into him when he put his arm around me. Old habit. Eleanor always came early on Thanksgiving. She'd bring the pies and boss me around my own kitchen. She was good at that. She was excellent at that. I turned from the window. Corey's coming. I know. Trish is nervous. I know that too. Frank kissed my forehead. She'll be fine. So will you. The preparations took all morning. Trish arrived at 10 with 3 pies and a tension in her shoulders that hadn't been there in weeks. She'd moved back into her house in September, after the legal mess with Dale was fully settled. The deed was still in my name, but she understood why now. She'd even thanked me, which was something I'd never expected. Where should I put these? She held up the pies like shields. On the sideboard. And relax. He's not arriving armed. I know. I just haven't seen him since everything. You've seen him at church. From across the room doesn't count. Before I could answer, the doorbell rang. Frank shot me a look and went to answer it. Corey stood on the porch, snow dusting his shoulders. He wore a wool coat that had seen better days and carried a single pie in a disposable tin. Store-bought. The kind with the crimped edges that nobody could ever quite replicate. I didn't know what to bring, he said. So I brought pumpkin. Frank took the pie. Pumpkin works. Corey stepped inside and stamped the snow from his boots. He looked around the house, the same house he'd visited 100 times as a boy, the same furniture, the same smell of roasting turkey and sage. His eyes landed on Trish. She stood rigid by the dining table, a dish of cranberry sauce in her hands. "Hi, Trish." "Corey." The silence stretched uncomfortably. Then Trish set down the cranberry sauce and did something I didn't expect. She walked over and hugged him. "I'm still mad at you," she said into his shoulder. "I know. But it's Thanksgiving." "I know that too." When she pulled back, her eyes were wet but her jaw was set. "One chance. That's all you get. That's all I need." Dinner was strange and wonderful and awkward in all the ways family dinners are supposed to be. Corey sat at the foot of the table, the seat that had been empty since Eleanor died. Frank said grace. Trish's stuffing was too dry, and my gravy was too salty, and nobody cared. Halfway through the meal, Corey set down his fork. "I want to say something." Trish tensed. Frank's hand found mine. "I know I've apologized before. In letters, in church, in bits and pieces. But I've never said it all at once, to everyone who matters." He looked at me. "Aunt Maggie, I called you a soft touch. I used your love for my mother against you. I took your generosity and twisted it into something ugly. And when you held me accountable, I tried to destroy you by hurting Trish." He turned to my daughter. "I sent Dale into your life knowing exactly what kind of man he was. I told myself it wasn't my problem, that you were an adult, that you made your own choices. But I knew. And I did it anyway." Trish looked down at her plate. "I don't expect forgiveness today. Or ever, really. But I wanted to say it out loud, with witnesses, so there's no confusion about what I did and who's responsible." He picked up his fork. "That's all. Thank you for having me." The silence that followed was heavy but not hostile. Frank cleared his throat. Trish wiped her eyes with her napkin. I reached across the table and put my hand over Corey's. "Thank you for saying that." He nodded, his jaw tight with emotion. "Now eat your turkey before it gets cold." He laughed, a surprised, shaky laugh, and picked up his fork. The years rolled on like the Wisconsin River, slow and steady and full of hidden depths. Corey kept working construction. He kept making his $50 payments every Friday. He found a small apartment above a hardware store and furnished it with things from Goodwill. He started attending church regularly, sitting in the back row, leaving before the final hymn so he wouldn't have to make small talk. Trish took over the shop. Not officially, I still owned it, but she ran the day-to-day operations with an ease that surprised us both. She'd inherited my eye for display and Frank's head for numbers. Customers started asking for her by name. Frank restored a 1967 Mustang in the garage. It took him 3 years. When he finally got it running, he took me for a drive through the countryside, the autumn leaves blazing around us like fire. "We did okay, didn't we?" he said. "We did better than okay." "You think Corey's going to make it?" I watched the fields pass. "I think he's been making it. Quietly. That's the important part." 5 years after the barbecue, I received an envelope in the mail. Not white this time. Brown. Business-sized. Inside was a check for $10,000 and a letter. "Aunt Maggie. I got promoted. Foreman now. It comes with a raise, so I'm increasing my payments. This check covers the next stretch. I know it's still a drop in the bucket, but the bucket's getting fuller. I met someone. Her name is Diane, no relation to your terrifying lawyer. She's a nurse at the clinic. She has a son from a previous marriage. He's 7 and likes dinosaurs. I'm teaching him to throw a baseball. I'm terrible at it, but he doesn't seem to mind. I think about my mom a lot lately. I think about how she'd feel, seeing me now. I hope she'd be proud. I hope you're proud too, even if you're not ready to say it. Either way, I'm going to keep going. That's what you taught me. Corey. I read the letter at the kitchen table. Frank watched me from across the room. When I finished, I was crying, not hard, just a steady leak I couldn't seem to stop. Maggie? He's teaching a boy to throw a baseball. Frank crossed the room and pulled me into his arms. Sounds like somebody taught him something after all. 7 years after the barbecue, I turned 65. Frank threw me a party at the shop, which Trish had officially taken over by then. I was retired in name only. I still came in 3 days a week to arrange displays and gossip with customers. The party was supposed to be small. It wasn't. Half the town showed up, filling the shop with laughter and terrible singing and a cake that Mrs. Patterson had somehow transported without dropping. Corey arrived late, as always, but this time it wasn't for effect. He'd been working a double shift and hadn't had time to change. He walked in wearing dusty jeans and a flannel shirt, and he was holding the hand of a woman in blue scrubs. Aunt Maggie, this is Diane. Diane, this is the woman who saved my life. Diane had a firm handshake and kind eyes. I've heard a lot about you. Don't believe any of it. Too late. He talks about you constantly. Behind them, a small boy with a dinosaur shirt peered around Corey's leg. Is that her? The scary aunt? I knelt down. I'm not scary. I'm strategic. That's what Uncle Corey said. He said you're the smartest person he knows. I looked up at Corey. He shrugged, a little embarrassed. I might have mentioned it once or twice. The party continued. Frank fired up the smoker behind the shop, because some things never changed. Trish and Diane discovered they had the same taste in books and spent an hour talking about novels I'd never heard of. The dinosaur boy, his name was Leo, drew pictures of the shop on napkins. Near the end of the evening, Corey found me alone by the front window. Outside, Elm Street was quiet and dark, the storefronts glowing with holiday lights. I have something for you. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It's not money. Not yet. But it's a plan. I unfolded it. It was a business proposal. Corey's construction, a handyman service he wanted to start. The numbers were careful and conservative. No shortcuts. No schemes. Will you look it over? He asked. Tell me if it makes sense. Why me? Because you'll tell me the truth. You always have. He paused. Even when I didn't want to hear it. I folded the paper and tucked it into my pocket. I'll look at it tomorrow. Tonight, we celebrate. He smiled, not the slick campaign smile from all those years ago, but something quieter. Something real. Happy birthday, Aunt Maggie. Thank you, Corey. 8 years after the barbecue, I fell ill. It started as fatigue, just a heaviness in my limbs that wouldn't lift. Then came the swelling in my ankles. Then the tests, the referrals, the hushed conversations between doctors that stopped when I entered the room. Kidney failure. Both of them. I needed a transplant. Frank took the news like a punch to the gut. Trish immediately got tested, and she was a match. When she told me, she was matter of fact, as if donating an organ was no different from lending someone a sweater. You gave me life once, she said. Now I'm giving it back. Trish. Mom. I've made up my mind. Don't fight me on this. I didn't have the strength to argue. The surgery was scheduled for November. The night before, Corey came to the hospital. He'd driven 3 hours from a job site and still had sawdust in his hair. The nurses tried to stop him, visiting hours were over, but Corey had a way of talking people into things. Some skills never entirely went away. He sat beside my bed. For a long time, neither of us spoke. "You're going to be fine," he said finally. "That's what the doctors say." "I'm not talking about the doctors. I'm talking about you. You're the toughest person I've ever met." He leaned forward. "Do you remember what you told me? When I was 12 and I broke my arm falling out of the oak tree? You were trying to impress the Patterson girl. And you said, 'Corey, pain is just your body telling you it's still alive. Listen to it, respect it, and then get back up.'" He took my hand. "So get back up, Aunt Maggie. There's still banana pudding to make." I squeezed his fingers. "Look at you. Giving me pep talks. Learned from the best." The surgery took 6 hours. When I woke, Frank was there, his eyes rimmed with red. Trish was in the next room, recovering, a little lighter in the abdomen but otherwise whole. "We did it," Frank whispered. "Both of you. You're going to be fine." I drifted back into sleep with his hand wrapped around mine. The recovery was long and slow. I moved through it like walking through deep snow, one step at a time, each one an effort. Trish bounced back faster, young and resilient in ways I no longer was. She visited every day, sometimes with soup, sometimes with nothing but her company. Corey came on weekends. He'd bought a used truck for his handyman business and always parked it carefully in the driveway, never blocking Frank's car. He'd sit with me while Frank ran errands, telling me about his jobs, a deck repair, a kitchen remodel, a roof that needed patching after a storm. "The business is doing well," he said one afternoon. "I've got 3 guys working for me now." "That's wonderful. It's honest work. Hard work." He smiled slightly. "You'd approve." "I do approve." He looked out the window. The oak tree in the backyard was bare, its branches tracing black lines against the winter sky. "I've been paying the loan for 8 years now. I figure I've paid back about $20,000. At $50 a week, that sounds right. I'm never going to pay off the whole amount. You know that, right?" "Not in my lifetime." I adjusted my blanket. "I know. Then why keep taking the payments?" "Because they matter to you." I met his eyes. "They remind you of where you've been. And they remind you of where you're going." He nodded slowly. "The offer still stands. If you ever want to forgive the rest of the debt." "I don't." "Okay." He didn't seem surprised. "Then I'll keep paying." "I know you will." Spring came, and with it, my strength. I started walking the neighborhood again, first with a cane, then without. Frank restored another car, a 1972 Chevelle this time. Trish expanded the shop, adding a small cafe corner that sold coffee and pastries. The town loved it. Corey's business grew. He hired more workers. He paid his taxes on time. He became a deacon at the church, a development that surprised everyone, including him. Pastor Mike told me about it one Sunday. He came to me and said, "I'm not sure I'm qualified." I told him that's the best qualification there is. "He's changed," I said. "You changed him." "No." I watched Corey across the fellowship hall, laughing at something Mrs. Patterson had said. "He changed himself. I just gave him the push." On the 10th anniversary of the barbecue, I invited Corey over for dinner. Just the 4 of us, me, Frank, Trish, and Corey. No crowd. No toast. No envelopes. Frank grilled steaks. Trish made a salad. I baked a pie, banana, because some traditions deserve to continue. After dinner, we sat on the porch. The fireflies were out, blinking in the dusk like tiny, earthbound stars. "I've been thinking," Corey said, "about my mother." "What about her?" "About what she would have wanted. For me. For us." He looked at me. "She would have hated what I became. But I think she would have loved what you did about it." "I think so too." "Eleanor was the best of us," Frank said quietly. She'd be proud of you, Corey. Both of you. We sat in comfortable silence as the night settled around us. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. A screen door slammed. The ordinary sounds of an ordinary evening in an ordinary town. And it was enough. It was more than enough. 2 years later, Frank died. It happened in his sleep, which was a mercy. He'd been working on the Chevelle that afternoon, humming some old country song, his hands covered in grease. He'd come inside, kissed my cheek, and said he was going to turn in early. In the morning, he was gone. The funeral was the largest Elmwood had ever seen. Frank had touched more lives than either of us had realized. The church couldn't hold everyone. People stood in the aisles and spilled out onto the steps. Corey gave the eulogy. He stood at the podium in a simple dark suit, his hands steady on the wood. I wasn't Frank's son. I was just his wife's nephew, the difficult one, the one who caused trouble, the one who broke things. But Frank never treated me like a burden. Even when I deserved it. He paused. Especially when I deserved it. A ripple of gentle laughter. Frank taught me what a man looks like. Not by telling me, he wasn't much for lectures. But by showing up. Every day. For his wife. For his family. For this town. He was steady in a way I didn't understand until I had to learn to be steady myself. Corey's voice cracked, just slightly. I named my son after him. He's 4 now. He has Frank's stubbornness and his love of old cars and his complete inability to follow a recipe. I see Frank in him every day, and I'm grateful. He looked at me, sitting in the front row between Trish and Diane. Aunt Maggie, you once told me that the softest things hold the sharpest edges. Frank was the softest man I ever knew. And he held us all together. I closed my eyes and let the tears come. After the service, I stood by the grave as they lowered the casket. The sky was gray and threatening rain. Corey stood on one side of me, Trish on the other. Where do we go from here? Trish whispered. Forward, I said. That's what Frank would have wanted. The rain started as we walked to the car, gentle and steady, like a blessing. In the years after Frank's death, I learned to be alone without being lonely. The shop kept me busy. Trish's children, she'd married a kind schoolteacher named Robert and had twin boys, filled the house with noise and chaos and joy every weekend. Corey's business continued to thrive. He opened a second location in the next town over and hired more workers. His son, little Frank, grew up with Frank's patience and Corey's charm, a combination that would serve him well. On the 15th anniversary of the barbecue, Corey came to visit. He was 56 now, gray at the temples, lines around his eyes. He carried himself differently than the man who'd blocked my driveway with an Escalade all those years ago. Lighter, somehow. Freer. We sat on the porch, as we had so many times before. I made the last payment, he said. I turned to look at him. The last? Not the full amount. I'll never pay the full amount. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. But I calculated what $50 a week for 15 years adds up to, with interest. It's about $40,000. I figured that's enough. I unfolded the paper. It was a bank statement showing a final transfer of $2,000 and a note that read, "Loan paid in full, per agreement with lender." I don't remember agreeing to that, I said. You didn't. I decided. He smiled, a little nervously. I'm done paying, Aunt Maggie. Not because I'm quitting. Because I've paid enough. The rest of what I owe you can't be measured in money. I folded the paper and set it on the arm of my rocking chair. What does it feel like? What does what feel like? Being done. He thought about it. Like I can finally breathe. Like I've been holding my breath for 15 years and didn't know it until now. I nodded. Good. Good? That was the point. Not the money. The breathing. He was quiet for a moment. Then he laughed. You really did plan everything. Not everything. Just enough. I rocked gently, the chair creaking on the porch boards. I'm proud of you, Corey. I don't think I've ever said that out loud. You haven't. Well. I'm saying it now. He reached over and took my hand. We sat like that for a while, watching the sun sink behind the oak tree, the same tree he'd fallen out of as a boy, the same tree his son now climbed when they visited. Life, I reflected, had a way of coming full circle. Not in the neat, tidy way of stories, but in the messy, imperfect way of real families, real love, real forgiveness earned one day at a time. I was 73 years old. My husband was gone. My sister was gone. But I was surrounded by children and grandchildren and a nephew who'd finally become the man his mother had hoped he'd be. Corey, I said. Yes, ma'am? Bring the family next Sunday. I'll make banana pudding. He grinned. Yes, ma'am. As the last light faded and the first stars appeared, I thought about that barbecue 15 years ago. The smoke. The crowd. The envelope. The word's soft touch hanging in the air like a curse. He'd been right about one thing. I was soft. Soft like the earth after rain. Soft like a mother's hand on a fevered forehead. Soft like forgiveness that took years to grow but bloomed anyway. Soft things, I'd learned, were the hardest things of all to break. The screen door creaked. Trish's boys were chasing fireflies in the yard, their laughter ringing through the dusk. Inside, someone had put on music, an old country song, the one Frank used to hum in the garage. I rocked gently in my chair and smiled. Not bad, I thought. Not bad at all. The following spring, I turned 74. I didn't want a party. I wanted to plant a garden. Frank had always handled the vegetable patch, tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers that grew so fast you couldn't give them away fast enough. The garden had gone wild since he passed, and every time I looked out the kitchen window at the tangled mess, I felt a pang of guilt. So on a bright April morning, I put on Frank's old gardening gloves and went outside to wrestle with the weeds. Trish found me there an hour later, on my knees in the dirt, muttering at a particularly stubborn dandelion. Mom, what are you doing? Gardening. What does it look like? It looks like you're losing a fight with a weed. She knelt beside me. Want help? I want your father back. But I'll settle for help with the garden. She didn't say anything to that. She just picked up a trowel and started working beside me. We spent the morning in the dirt, and by noon, the garden was clear. We planted tomatoes and peppers and cucumbers, the same as Frank always had. Feels right, Trish said, brushing soil from her knees. It does. Dad would have approved. Your father would have told us we planted the tomatoes too close together and then replanted them himself when we weren't looking. Trish laughed. You're right. He absolutely would have. We washed our hands at the outdoor spigot and sat on the porch steps, looking at our work. The garden was neat and orderly and full of promise. Corey's coming over later, I said. He's bringing Diane and the kids. I know. I told him to bring a salad. You told him to bring a salad? Someone had to. He'd show up with store-bought cookies and call it a contribution. I smiled. The world had a way of working itself out. Not in the ways you expected, but in the ways you needed. Corey arrived at 5 with his truck full of family. Little Frank, now 6, burst out of the back seat and made a beeline for the oak tree. His sister Eleanor, named for my sister, a choice that had made me cry when I first heard it, followed more slowly, carrying a book about dinosaurs. Sorry we're late, Diane said, handing me a bowl of potato salad. Your nephew couldn't find his keys. They were in the ignition, Corey admitted. The whole time. Some things never change, I said. Some things. He kissed my cheek. How are you doing, Aunt Maggie? I'm doing just fine. The garden is planted. The shop is thriving. I have nothing to complain about. That's not true. You could complain about your knees. I do, and I'm 20 years younger. My knees are between me and the Lord. I don't discuss them in public. Diane laughed and carried the potato salad inside. Trish's twins were already chasing little Frank around the yard, and Eleanor had settled under the oak tree with her book, exactly the way her namesake used to do. Dinner was loud and chaotic and wonderful. We crowded around the same table that had seen so many family meals, passing dishes, and telling stories and arguing about things that didn't matter. At one point, Corey stood up and tapped his glass with a fork. The room went quiet. "Oh no," Trish said. "Another toast?" "Not a toast. An announcement." He looked at Diane, who nodded. "We're moving back to Elmwood." The silence lasted about 2 seconds before everyone started talking at once. "The business in Madison is doing well enough that I can open a branch here," Corey explained. "We've already found a house. It's on Maple Street, 3 blocks from here." 3 blocks, I repeated. "Close enough that the kids can walk over after school. If that's okay with you." I looked around the table. Trish was grinning. The children were cheering about something unrelated. Diane was watching me with that calm nurse's expression of hers. 3 blocks is fine, I said. 3 blocks is just fine. That night, after everyone had gone home and the dishes were done, I sat on the porch in Frank's old rocking chair. The stars were out. The fireflies were beginning their summer dance. "So," I said to the empty chair beside me, "Corey's moving back. 3 blocks away. I hope you're ready for the chaos." The chair didn't answer. But I felt Frank's presence anyway, in the creak of the porch boards and the whisper of the oak leaves and the distant sound of a country song playing on someone's radio. I rocked gently and watched the stars. When I was 76, Trish officially took over ownership of Cole's Corner. We signed the papers at the bank, the same bank where Corey had signed his life away all those years ago. Different manager now, but the same wood-paneled office. "Are you sure about this?" Trish asked, pen hovering over the signature line. "I've been sure for years. The shop has been yours in everything but name for a long time. This just makes it official." She signed. I signed. The bank manager stamped something and shook our hands. Outside, on the sidewalk, Trish hugged me so tight I thought my ribs might crack. "Thank you, Mom. For everything. You earned it. Every bit of it. I couldn't have done it without you." "You could have," I said. "But I'm glad you didn't have to." She walked back to the shop, and I walked to the diner on the corner for a cup of coffee. The same diner where Frank and I had eaten breakfast every Saturday for 30 years. The waitress knew my order by heart. "Morning, Mrs. Cole." "The usual?" "Yes, please, Betty." I sat in the same booth we'd always sat in, the one by the window with the view of the courthouse. The coffee was hot and the toast was buttered just right, and I was content. At 78, I started writing letters. Not emails, letters. Handwritten, on stationery I'd bought from the shop years ago. I wrote to Trish, telling her how proud I was. I wrote to Corey, reminding him of how far he'd come. I wrote to my grandchildren, leaving them pieces of family history they'd never find in a textbook. And I wrote to Frank. Letters I'd never send, filled with all the things I still wanted to say. "Dear Frank. The tomatoes came in beautifully this year. You would have been insufferable about it. Corey's son asked me about you yesterday. He wanted to know what kind of music you liked. I told him country, mostly, but also that one Elvis song you used to sing in the shower. He made me play it for him. We danced in the living room. He has your rhythm, which is to say, none at all. I miss you. I'll always miss you. But I'm doing okay. Love, Maggie." I sealed the letter in an envelope and placed it in a box with all the others. Maybe someday someone would find them. Maybe they wouldn't. Either way, writing them brought me peace. On my 80th birthday, the whole family gathered at the house. Trish and Robert and the twins, now teenagers. Corey and Diane and little Frank and Eleanor. Even Mrs. Patterson, now 92 and still sharp as a tack. The yard was full of laughter and music and the smell of barbecue. Corey had taken over grilling duties, and he was basting the ribs with something that smelled suspiciously like Frank's old recipe. "Where did you get that sauce?" I asked. "Frank gave it to me. Years ago." Corey flipped a rack of ribs with practiced ease. "Said I'd need it someday." He was right. He usually was. After dinner, Trish stood up and tapped her glass. The gesture was so familiar now that everyone laughed. "I'm not going to make a speech," she said. "I just want to say happy birthday to my mother. The woman who taught me everything I know. About business. About family. About how to be strong without being hard." She raised her glass. "To Maggie." "To Maggie," everyone echoed. I looked around the yard. At Trish, who'd grown into a confident, capable woman. At Corey, who'd transformed from a slick-talking schemer into a steady, reliable man. At the grandchildren, who were growing up surrounded by love and boundaries and the knowledge that actions have consequences. And I thought about that barbecue, 22 years ago. The smoke. The crowd. The envelope. The word soft touch drifting through the air. It all felt like another lifetime. Another person. Later, after the cake and the presents and the goodbyes, I sat on the porch in Frank's rocking chair. The stars were out. The oak tree rustled in the summer breeze. Corey came out and sat in the chair beside me. "Good party," he said. "Good party. You're awfully quiet." "I'm thinking." "What about?" "About your mother. About what she said to me before she died." Corey was silent. "She said, 'Take care of my boy, Maggie. He's going to need you.'" I rocked slowly. I didn't understand what she meant at the time. I thought she meant protecting you. Keeping you safe. But that wasn't it. What was it? She meant I should teach you. The way she would have, if she'd lived. I turned to look at him. "I think she'd be proud of you now." Corey's eyes glistened. "You think so?" "I know so." He reached over and took my hand. We sat like that, in the quiet, under the stars. "Thank you," he said. "For not giving up on me." "I never gave up on you, Corey. I just refused to let you stay the way you were." "That's the same thing." "I suppose it is." The years continued their steady march. At 82, I stopped going to the shop altogether. Trish didn't need me hovering. At 84, I gave up driving, a concession that annoyed me greatly but seemed to relieve everyone else. Corey drove me to church every Sunday. He always arrived 10 minutes early, always opened my door, always asked if I'd eaten breakfast. "You're fussing," I told him. "I learned from the best." At 86, I fell. Nothing serious, a misstep on the porch stairs. But it landed me in the hospital for a few days, and when I came home, the whole family was waiting. "You're not living alone anymore," Trish announced. "I'm moving in. This is my house. And I'm your daughter. We'll argue about it later." I didn't argue. Truth be told, I was tired. The kind of tired that comes not from a single event but from the accumulated weight of decades. A good tired. A full tired. The house became busy again. Trish cooked. Robert handled the yard work. The grandchildren visited constantly, filling the rooms with noise and energy and life. Corey came every Sunday, same as always. He'd sit with me on the porch and tell me about the business, about his children, about the ordinary details of an ordinary life well lived. "Do you remember," he asked one Sunday, "when I called you a soft touch?" I remember. I was so stupid back then. You were young and arrogant. There's a difference. Not much of one. He smiled. "You know what I realized? You are soft. Just not in the way I meant. How so? Soft like good soil. The kind that lets things grow. He looked out at the garden, where the tomatoes were ripening. Everything I am now, everything I've built, it all grew from what you gave me. Not the money. The lesson. I reached over and patted his hand. You finally figured it out. Took me long enough. Some things take time. That fall, on a crisp October morning, I woke up feeling lighter than I had in years. The pain in my joints had faded. The fog in my mind had cleared. I felt, for the first time in a long time, completely at peace. I made myself breakfast. I watered the plants on the porch. I sat in Frank's rocking chair and watched the sun climb over the oak tree. Trish found me there an hour later. Mom? You okay? I'm fine, sweetheart. Better than fine. She sat in the chair beside me. You look happy. I am happy. I reached over and took her hand. I've been thinking about your father. What about him? About how he used to say that a good life wasn't about what you accumulated. It was about what you put back into the world. I squeezed her fingers. I think we put back a lot. We did. You did. We all did. Together. We sat in silence, watching the morning unfold. Birds sang. A neighbor's dog barked. Somewhere, a lawnmower started up. Mom, Trish said quietly, are you scared? Of what? Of, you know. The end. I thought about it. No. I'm not scared. I've had a good run. A full run. And I'll see your father again. You really believe that? I do. I smiled. Besides, somebody needs to yell at him about that time he used my good sewing scissors to cut a radiator hose. Trish laughed, tears streaming down her face. He really did that? He really did. And I've been saving that complaint for 30 years. We laughed together, and the sound of it drifted across the yard, over the garden, past the oak tree, and up into the perfect October sky. I passed away that winter, quietly, in my sleep. Just like Frank. The funeral was held at the church where I'd worshipped for 60 years, and the crowd was even larger than it had been for Frank's. Corey gave the eulogy again. He stood at the podium, gray-haired and steady, and told the story of the barbecue. She handed me an envelope and walked away. I thought I'd won. I thought I'd outsmarted her. I thought I was the cleverest man in Elmwood. He paused. I was the stupidest man in Elmwood. But Aunt Maggie, she didn't leave me there. She gave me consequences. She gave me accountability. And then, when I was ready, she gave me another chance. He looked at the casket, and his voice broke. She was the softest person I ever knew. And the strongest. She taught me that softness isn't weakness. It's the hardest thing in the world to do right. And she did it right. Every single day. After the service, they buried me next to Frank, under a simple headstone that read, Margaret Cole, beloved wife, mother, and aunt. She let things grow. Spring came again, as it always does. Trish ran the shop. Corey ran his business. The grandchildren grew up and had children of their own. And if you walk through Elmwood today, you'll find Cole's Corner still open on Elm Street. You'll find Corey's construction trucks parked outside half the houses in town. You'll find an oak tree behind the Cole house, older and taller now, with a swing hanging from its lowest branch. And if you visit the Elmwood Community Church on a Sunday morning, you might hear Pastor Mike, now retired, but still attending, tell the story of the barbecue. The story of the envelope. The story of the woman who was called a soft touch and proved that the softest things are the strongest things of all. The story of Maggie Cole, who loved her family enough to break it so it could grow back stronger. The story of a life well lived, and a legacy that endured long after the smoke cleared and the guests went home and the last firefly blinked out in the summer dusk. Not bad, she would have said. Not bad at all.